Board of Trustees, June 21st, 2017 meeting to order. Please stand for a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, roll call.
Mrs. Luda? Here. Mr. Malcheski?
Present.
Mr. Galloway?
I'm here.
Okay, folks, for the people that are new here, we have a court reporter here, so she's going to take down everything that's said. So let's be quiet until anybody approaches the podium, so that she can get everything down. Approval minutes, June 7th, 2017.
No corrections.
Okay.
No, they look good.
All right. So we'll approve June 7th, 2017 minutes.
Right.
Officials reports. Amy.
Just wanted to tell everybody we had our annual audit, because we're doing an annual audit now because of the road program, and the results are listed on the Auditor of State's website. So, business as usual.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Chris, anything?
Paul, just a couple minor things on some stormwater issues with a couple residences. Really, that's been it.
Carmen?
I had a call this morning that I turned over to Frank, that's all.
Okay, well, I had a couple calls on stormwater issues that I went out to, basically finishing up the project through Quail Hollow, and then there was an issue with regards to question about what was done in Quail recently. There's been about 4,381 square yards laid by our crews, and that took our crews about 40 working days, and that's generally a 4 to 5 man crew with the equipment out there. So with that, we don't have department reports. Folks, I know everybody's here for probably the same reason, so we're just going to go and move to our new business, take care of that, and we'll do the audience portion. Since there's no old business, new business on the resignation letter for part-time firefighter Lieutenant John Kobotz.
I make a motion to accept John's resignation letter with regrets and wishing him well in his future endeavors.
I will second that and say that it is effective June 1st.
Yeah, I know John. He and I went to high school together, graduated together.
He's that old.
Yes, he's that old. He's done an excellent job for us. He is with part-time. He's retiring from his part-time and going to stick with his business. And I think quickly to tell you that what he did during the flood is that you guys can recall what a great efforts he made and heroic in rescuing a lot of people. So good luck to him. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Fire Department purchase order number 492017, the amount of $2,643.77, and this is for Siranet Com for lights and sirens for the new deputy chief vehicle.
I move that we approve.
I'll second.
All in favor say aye.
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 I'll go through future meetings announcements if you like.
Sure, go ahead and do that.
On Friday, June 30th at 12 p.m., there will be a staff meeting here in Town Hall in the conference room. On Monday, July 3rd, township facilities will be closed in observance of the 4th of July holiday. The same goes for Tuesday, July 4th. The township will be closed. And then on Wednesday, July 5th, we'll be right back here at 6:30 for trustee office hours in the conference room, and then followed by our regularly scheduled trustee meeting at 7:30.
Okay, that leaves us to the audience portion, and we have quite a few people here, and I assume by the nods of heads, everybody's here with regards to a zoning issue that will be coming in front of the Concord Township Zoning Commission, if that's correct. Just to let the general public out there know, as of right now, that is not before the trustees. We'll certainly hear you out today, but I will at least let the general public know that that is not before us. It has been to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission has sent it to the Zoning Commission. The Zoning Commission will be reviewing the Planning Commission's comments and questions, making amendments to that, and then once they're done with their work, they will then pass it to the Concord Township trustees. So that's the procedure of what is going on with that overlay district, which is my assumption why everybody's here. Just to kind of, I guess, address some issues that at least I have seen come across in emails and rhetoric on Facebook. Couple things. Certainly, it is at least my opinion that this does not include what is said here is 7,000 multi-family homes. I 100% disagree with that. I don't think that that's what this plan calls for. It's certainly not my intent, and I think I would just be as horrified if that was what someone was doing. But I don't believe that's the intent here. I also disagree with regards to the acreage that is being discussed. At least my position is in the plots of land that I believe should be included in the overlay district, if there is such an overlay district, would be approximately 120. It's actually like 119 point something. This area that is discussed in this town center concept is something that has been worked upon by this board for several years, and so I think it's important to kind of go through a little bit of history, and I'm hoping that my comments beforehand would relieve some people, and they can alter their comments, and we can get straight to the heart of the issue. And when Chris and I took office, there was a comprehensive plan, and there was some plans for this area that we sit in right now. And the purpose of what they were discussing at the time was typically what you see governments do, but place some additional buildings, township buildings up for whatever would be necessary, but try to make it a little bit more of a recreation center here at Town Hall. And we were faced with a couple of things as we took office. The hospital was coming in, construction was starting. There was a traffic problem already existing there at the time, and at least from my standpoint, and I believe Chris's standpoint, I believe in less government. I believe in less government buildings. Nowadays, most people are able to do a lot of their work with their cell phone. And so there needs to be less space. So my thoughts were, and I think this board had turned towards making provisions for long-term use. And we talked about a 100-year plan. We talked about, and we placed a plan in place, and we want to, several homeowners associations meetings, talked at Painesville Chamber of Commerce, Painesville Area Chamber of Commerce, Mentor Area Chamber of Commerce, and to discuss what we believe what was going to happen with Concord Township and how we're going to deal with some of the challenges in front of us. And what we did and what we laid in place right around that time is we came up with the concept of putting a joint economic development district in. And the joint economic development district is only over in the area where we're discussing right now. It includes portions of the hospital buildings. It includes currently portions that are in this overlay district potentially that we're talking about. And the purpose of putting that in there was that that allowed us to receive income tax dollars from those areas where they were not paying real property tax. Everybody just got their property tax bills. I just got mine, and Lake Hospital and portions of Lake Hospital building and portions of the UH building and other surrounding areas there, because they're not-for-profit, we're not paying those taxes. And so we installed this Joint Economic Development District to deal with some of those pains that were going to occur with those hospitals coming in. But it's also, we thought that they were fine establishments to be placed here in Concord Township, and there were certain benefits, and they become somewhat anchors for some new development. And so we installed that JED. That JED has generated revenue to allow us to pay for the road improvements that have just, or are about to be finished, to deal with the traffic issues. The JED allowed us to, there was a discussion here about a portion of this area that we purchased 7 acres. That JED and those JED dollars allowed us to purchase those 7 acres so that we can control that corner. There's a requirement that we have certain, I guess, economic stability, and our funds are diversified, but those dollars allow us to do that, hold that property, control that property, and it allows that property to enter the JED, so that when that property is developed, that piece of property will be also inside the JED to gain revenues. That purpose and those purposes of generating those dollars is for sustainability of Concord Township. And again, we think in the minds, generally as a young adult and as an adult, you think in the lines of 30 years and what a typical mortgage is. Township lives forever. Our vision, we believed, had to be a lot longer, so our visions were always for 100 years in our planning. And as we discussed this stuff, that back in 2008, we walked everybody through, well, actually 2006, we'd also discussed economic development in the area, and we talked about placing something in Concord Township in that area that we're discussing tonight, which would be a mixed-use development. And I think the first time we discussed it in a public hearing was back in 2006. We used First and Main as an example. It allows people to have a vision and have something that...
What First and Main is.
First and Main is a project that was done in Hudson. We went out in early 2006 to look at the project in Hudson. And we went out there to look at it because Hudson has the exact demographics of Concord Township. They were also...
Very close.
Very
Not
close.
exact.
Pretty close. And they were also lacking that commercial economic development that they thought was sustainable. They put in mixed-use development in. We went down, spent time with the councilman, mayor, walked around the project, talked to them about the pros and cons, and then we started to discuss that among ourselves and did additional research. From there, the the Port Authority and put together an economic development strategy for Lake County as a whole. I participated in that, not as a Concord Township trustee, but as through my law practice. The purpose was going through there saying, well, and I still believe this to this day, Lake County has been a very stable entity. It doesn't go too low during hard economic times, such as 2008, but it also doesn't ever put the pedal on the metal and succeed and going very far in new economic development. The other issue that was going on was that the township as well as Lake County was getting older, and there was a sense that it was going to require us to regenerate and make sure that we bring in some younger generations to stay here in Lake County. So that endeavor took off, and the suggestion was that they wanted some smart growth principles, mixed land use, take advantage of compact building designs, create a range of housing opportunities, create walkable communities, foster distinctive, attractive communities, and a strong sense of place. And I thought additionally to that, Concord Township lacked, back in 2004, they thought that Concord Township lacked a sense of place, and so they were suggesting to make this area that you sit here in the town hall as a sense of place. But as most of you arrived here, it's not a place that generally a lot of people hang out in. And so in our thought pattern, the idea was we wanted to create an area that was a mixed-use development area that provided economic development and provided Concord Township with a sense of place. And so when we came up with the concept of this mixed use, it required us to kind of investigate and make sure that we know the pros and cons of what was going on there. It is our thought that our concept meets the standards and the requirements to be a very viable entity. And I will tell you that it's certainly some of the concerns that have been raised through emails would be the same concerns that I would have if those were true. I don't think they're true. If the language on the draft, that's, I want to say, about 206 pages, if the language on the draft is required for us to tighten it up, put bootstraps on, I know that this trustee and I believe this board is willing to do that. But it does go through the process, and the process is it goes from the planning commission, which it's been there, and it comes up to the zoning commission, and so there'll be a zoning commission meeting there, and I will make sure that we can provide a traffic engineer that has done some work for us, as well as any consultants that have done some work for us, so that they can assist in answering questions. In the last 10 or 11 years, 12 years that we've been going through this, at every step of the way we stopped and said, hey, do you have questions? Are there concerns? Let us know. We don't want to screw this up. It's at least been my point the entire time to do that. And so we're still in that mode, and we will always be in that mode. We have tweaked the zoning in this area over and over and over again in the last 12 years. And the purpose of that was for us to, as we gained more knowledge and as we had concerns, we wanted to tighten that up. Now, we believe that the overlay district gives the township powers that it doesn't have. And I'm a product of being in the township or in a township my entire life. I've been living in the same neighborhood except for my college years and law school years since I was 4, so about 41 years. And there's some things that you have to kind of recall. Townships don't have the same type of powers as cities, and because it's a smaller form of government and there's less restrictions. We believe that the overlay district allows us to have certain things that we don't ever have. And I always kind of equate it to, it's a PUD. Quail Hollow subdivision is a planned unit development that was put in place and structured so that the township and those trustees that were there before had the ability to put restrictions on things so that the development looked and feel the same way that they envisioned it to do. And that required them to have a recreation area, which is the golf course. It required them to have some small amount of commercial activity, which you see is grist mill. It required them to have a hotel, which you see is there. And it required the type of homes that are there with the type of restrictions that are there. And they were able to deal with architecture and put what I consider bootstraps on things that the township weren't able to do. And I believe it's a great community. I think that they continue to, it continues to age well. And that was the purpose, and that was the forethought in that. That should be the same purpose and forethought that we are putting into this as well. It's not our intent to make any flaws in what we are doing here. So what I'm going to ask, and I think maybe the best is, because we have some people here, is let's try to get our comments down to about 4 minutes, and we'll try not to interrupt you, and we'll try to answer your questions if it's necessary. I will be more than happy to meet with anybody and walk them through. I want to make sure that we get our facts accurate. If there's something we disagree on, I want to make sure that we're both accurate on the facts before we disagree on something. I think we all agree that we want to get this thing right, and we may have different philosophies. The facts shouldn't change, and I want you to know that as there is text that is written and went to the Planning Commission and came up, there's text in there that I'm not satisfied with as well. And so I know that if the Zoning Commission doesn't make certain changes, I know that I will be making certain changes or requesting certain changes to occur in that. Chris, any comments? Connie?
No.
Okay. Since we have a court reporter here, what we do ask is whoever wants to come up first, we can start whatever section you need. Come up to the podium, state your name, put your address down, or state your address, and then let's discuss. How about we start this row?
No.
Chris?
Chris Lazuka, 8130 North Orchard Road. I'm here, I'm just kind of really educating myself on what's happening here. And I guess in what I've, I guess, been studying recently, I've become really concerned about this and what this thing has kind of morphed into versus what I thought it was 10 years ago. So admittedly, 10 years ago, I thought this was a great idea to promote the commercial growth in the township. And it just appears to me on the surface that this has morphed into something that I entirely oppose, in that I think it changes the face of Concord Township. 44 years I've lived here, most of my life. I love this township. I love its sense of place. I disagree that it does not have a sense of place. I want to preserve what Concord Township is. I think that's what a lot of our community feels. And I think this is very much opposed to what Concord Township is. Whatever, if it's 40 units per acre, if it's 20 units per acre, I think the success or the failure, the potential failure of this could be devastating to our area.
So when you talk about it, you're talking about the overall concept of mixed-use development in its entirety? Any commercial
Bringing
development?
high
I just want to define what it is.
Bringing high-density housing into Concord.
Let me tell you at least what I think it is, and you know, there are flyers and suggestions and visions posted on here. Here's my vision of it. My vision is on that 7 acres that Concord Township owns right now and controls. I envision, first of all, open up with the clock tower so that there's something there that kind of stabilizes that this is kind of a new area. I see mixed use, and when I see mixed use, I think of a commercial development on the first floor. I believe that that would take up at least 1 or 2 floors, okay? So for instance.
As high as 4 floors?
No, I don't. So I believe the text here talks about 60 feet, and they're talking about mechanicals on top of that, and they're talking about Western Reserve architecture. And so what I believe that is I think it's no more than 3 stories, you know, in the completion. To give you an example, what you probably would be had knowledge of.
I've been to First and I mean,
Yeah.
I know what this
But
is like.
you know, so I don't envision anything different than that. If there's a question about 40 units in an acre.
Because that's it's in the text today, right?
Yeah.
That's what you would
Well,
probably.
that's for consideration. Okay, I'm not thrilled with that. So if you want to know one of my big issues that are going to be there, that's a huge issue for me. It should be a huge issue. It should be something that we discuss about that. Units above the mixed use, you know, and again, so if you have a mixed use development, you have a commercial floor. That commercial floor may eat up 1 or 2 of those floors. If you're going to have something above that, it's going to be a loft, and it's not going to be greater than 1 unit. If your commercial unit already took up 2, if you have 1 commercial unit and it's only taking up the first floor, I can't imagine greater than 2 units above that. Okay, and if the text doesn't, I think the text restricts those things. But if the text doesn't restrict those things, I'll change it. You know, but that's how I envision it. Okay, I envision in the rear of the project, you know, it's my taste and not anybody else's taste, but I love the Players Club look. Okay, I love those units looks, but those are not exactly townhouses. I love the inside of what was done in Stonehaven. Okay, that's inside Quail. Okay. Those, Stonehaven has 106 units. I used to think there was 100, there's 106 units. So I would envision some of those townhouses or cluster homes in the rear of this development, okay? I don't, you know, I don't know how to put any more additional restrictions than what I see in this text, but if somebody sees it and reads it the wrong way and it's misinterpreted, we're going to change those things. Okay?
From what you had described, and thanks for the history, you had mentioned demographics and finances are 2 of the primary motives for this project, right? You mentioned Lake County. Are you saying that Concord is projected to be in decline from a population standpoint? Because all I see is people are coming in, right?
You have 2 things in play. Concord is growing because we average somewhere around 90 housing starts a year. That's our current pace, if you will. With some of the new developments that are in existence and coming online, and developers are moving forward. So you have an overall increase, a steady increase in the population. We're probably at the next census going to be somewhere around 20,000, which would actually make us the largest township in this Northeast Ohio area. But you also have the overall demographic trends when you break down some of the census data. You have a reduction in the number of people per household. So we have new people coming in buying houses, but you have less people per household. What's that mean? You have less kids. If you look at some of the redevelopment plans of Riverside, they're reducing the number of classrooms and all the rest of that because their projections show that number of children is reducing itself in terms of who will be in their school district. And then if you look at the average age of Concord Township in the last census, the average age in Concord is now 54, which makes us on a national level, and even for Lake County, we're old. As an average age, 54. And that's older than what we were 10 years prior to that. I think prior to that we were like 48, 45. So we're getting older, and we're getting older quicker. We're all getting older. So when you say, is Concord, and you're hitting on a really important point, Chris, which is what is Concord now versus what is it going to be in terms of population? So we have that trend. We're growing, yes, new houses, fewer people per house, and our average age is getting older. So that increasing age is frankly, for a health and long-term stability and sustainability of the community, that's a bad trend. That's a bad trend line. We've all heard about, for 20 years in the Northeast, about brain drain, kids go to college, they don't come back, all that sort of thing. So there's that trend line. And then you have this other trend line, which is the largest segment of the U.S. population now is millennials. So you have this cauldron of conflicting demographic trends that are sort of happening in Concord. And our position is we need to find a way to position ourselves so that we're healthy as a community long-term in terms of viability, in terms of who's able to live here, who is choosing to live here. And that affects everybody in terms of the maintaining of the housing stock. You don't get into a situation where you get into some of the older suburbs in Cuyahoga where you start to see homes starting to fall apart, having some issues in that regard, because now you have older and older people who can't afford to maintain, but they have nowhere else to go. And so you need to bring in. Look what Willowick has really been pushing, and Mike knows, in terms of trying to bring in younger families, because they were much older, and they've been trying to bring in younger families into their housing stock. So it's an ability to sort of regenerate. Now, all that being said, we look at it like, how do we as trustees plan in terms of zoning, economic development, infrastructure, whatever you want to call it, to figure out how to put that Concord can position itself for long-term success and sustainability. The last thing we want to be is Shaker Heights or Cleveland Heights, where you end up with and I don't mean like that's not tomorrow. So when you say, well, what do we, is Concord expected to have problems? No, not right now, not 5 years from now, not 10 years from now. But what's 20 years out? What's 25 years now? And I can tell you, we're not the only ones dealing with it. Mentor is actively engaged in various things to try to work against some of those demographic trends. And so we're trying to find ways of how do we position ourselves so that this community is a place that A, thrives, and B, is a place that people want to be long term. Because that affects the bottom line when it comes to things like taxes, services, and the ability to support those things. So we've always had this focus of, okay, we have this commercial corridor. It's been zoned a commercial corridor since late 60s. And I say this all the time. In 1968, the township did a comprehensive plan, and their plan was where Quail Hollow is now. The township at the time believed that was a perfect spot for a Ford or a GM plant. So visions change, but it's always been a commercial corridor. Now, we haven't had a lot of development within that corridor until really recently. It sort of triggered, for the most part, other than a handful of businesses, with the development of the hospital. And Paul went through some of the history of how we started to try to capture that and sort of move forward in a fashion that would work. So the answer is yes. Is Concord going to have challenges down the road when you and I and Paul are sitting in one of these nursing homes? It could, if we don't now work on putting in place things that give future boards of trustees an opportunity to maximize in terms of what they're doing, and to give them an opportunity so that they're on the right side of those trend lines. A great example is sometimes I get from folks that have lived in Concord for 44, 50, 60 years. They remember when Concord was like Hamden Township, semi-rural. And people will say to me, I wish Concord was the way it used to be. And my response to that is, I understand that. But in 1978 and in 1984, those boards of trustees didn't increase lot sizes. they didn't change the zoning to make it so that it would end up like a much more rural community like Leroy or Hamden. They chose smaller lot sizes, especially on the west side. They chose sewers, they chose water, they chose for development. And so now moving forward, this is the world that we have to now manage in terms of growth patterns, demographics, and all the rest of that. So we're always cognizant of the decisions we make, the way that the decisions were made, say in the 70s and the early 80s. Our decisions now will affect those down the road.
Okay, and thank you.
My thoughts are is that you know, the growth in that area, that corridor, is not going to happen immediately. I don't see, it took us 10 years to get the road in, so it's going to take a while for that to happen.
Just last thing real quick. Do you feel you guys have done everything to make the community aware of what these plans are? Everything you can, through social media, through the Grapevine newsletter? Are you posting this? I mean, I admittedly haven't been coming to the meetings, but again, I think because of some of the emails that are circulating.
I'm questioning
it's
myself
drawn
if
me in.
that's the question. I'm amazed that not everybody knows about it. I only say it because...
I mean, the plans themselves, the pictures,
Well,
the words.
See,
Yeah.
the words just came about.
Okay.
Okay? The plans are not really plans, but they're kind of our concept ideas to provide something to look at when you look at the words to say, well, I do like that or I don't like that. Okay? So for example, if you're looking at something on a plan that you don't like, and you can go down to that section and say, listen, I got to button that up because I don't like the way that looks. Okay? And I say this, Concord Township has these, with regards to taxable valuation of a political subdivision, Concord Township is second only to Mentor in Lake County. Okay? And we're way above, I believe, way above, in my calculations, way above Willoughby. Okay? And you don't count the metro parks, so it's only taxable value. The metro parks eat up 16-17% of Concord Township. I don't want to degrade that, that entity. I want to make sure that our tax values continue to rise. Okay, that the value, that the money you put in your house continues to rise, and you have good value for that. So it is our intent to provide an asset to the township. And not provide any type of issues or questions or cost to us. And so, as people will ask about the cost and how do you plan on defraying some of these things, that's why we put it in the JED. That's why it's put in this area. It's there because that's an area that does generate money. It's different than the rest of the other areas.
I would just say, in short, I think in the last 10 years, I can't even tell you how many public meetings I've spoken at, in televised meetings I've spoke at. I mean, I'll tell you that I'll acknowledge being sort of blindsided by this sudden surge of, hey, I mean, we were initially accused of having done all these things in secret, and I'm like, man, here's 12 News Herald articles in the last 7 years. Here's 12, speaking in front of everyone in front of the Quail Homeowners Association about mixed-use development in the corridor. I mean, from my standpoint, I felt like, man, I thought we were talking. And I don't know if that's just we were, but people are busy, and everybody is. And so they weren't necessarily, not everybody, but some people aren't necessarily dialed in. And so, I kind of took to heart some of the things that Bob said at the last meeting about, we need to just open up this dialogue some more, and we're going to do that more, and more meetings like this, and we're going to have more public hearings, and it's not a matter of, hey, we're doing something in secret. I mean, we've got studies and meetings. I mean, we've been working on this for a decade, so I can understand where you're like, what, and some of the too, though, realizes shock value. You get an email from someone who says, the trustees are going to do all this and that, and blah, 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 and you're like, whoa, what is all this about? Now, the reality is that the plan that exists, the vision, or I should say the concept on the table, is not 7,700 dwellings. It's
Well, that's
100.
the extreme.
Right.
The example, but it's worded.
The way it's designed right now in terms of a concept and is literally, I think it's 190 housing units. Okay, that's a far cry from 7,700. Now, that said, we can have a discussion about how that looks, how that works, how that incorporates within the mixed-use development, and that's what this process is all about. And we're glad you're here. But yes, I mean, I think we're going to look to do more ways to educate folks on where we've been, kind of what Paul tried to do tonight, where we're going, what our thought process is, and what we've put into it, and then and to get some of that input and take into play. What we're going through right now is some of that language and how that's all going to come together. So we're like in the middle of it. So it's not a matter of we have this plan, you know, hardwired that this is how it is, and there are pictures, you've seen pictures, they've been floated out. You know, I hesitate to sort of just, you know, splash pictures everywhere because those are conceptual. I mean, they do represent, they are accurate in terms of the way the language is currently written, but as you know, when you have a private sector driven process, a developer driven process, you know, it's not going to look exactly the way, say, that concept is. You know, you get the question, well, you know, your picture had a building there, and they don't have a building there. They have a gazebo there. I mean, you know, so, you know, people can kind of get latched on to one particular thing versus, you know, the way it may end up being.
So we're still in a conceptual phase, a lot of changes to be done, but it feels like we're on the verge of this becoming, go past the point of no return.
We're
right?
we're just placing in the old, you know, the idea is, and what's coming up is the language on the overlay, okay? And so, and what Chris is telling you is that, you know, that has, we're going to be going through that. The zoning, you know, planning commission went through it. The planning commission said, you know what, your units are too small, okay? Now, I don't believe they're too small, you know. I don't think you're going to think they're too small, you know. And the purpose of having big units is because, you know, we want it to have, you know, a good look and a good feel, and we want it to be expensive. You know, it's the idea that, you know, it's a high quality item that we want to put in.
He's had more than 4 minutes.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm
Can I ask
sorry.
a couple of
Sure,
questions?
come on up here. I'm
All right,
sorry.
I have a couple of questions, because what you gentlemen are saying is not the
Hold
way
on,
the numbers
sir.
are. I'll
You
tell
need to
who I
give your
am.
name and your address for the court report, please.
I'm Tim Marlowe, and I live at 7372 Hunting Lake Drive.
Thank you.
And I've been a resident of Concord for over 30 years, and I moved into Quail Hollow. And just to address a couple issues that you mentioned, when we first, my wife and I first moved into the Quail Hollow development, it was supposed to be couples only. There was not going to be children at all. That was the so-called, that was the theme that when we bought that. Some of you will probably remember that. Well, it certainly changed, and it's a lot of families. So my comment to you about that is, your 54-year age group is probably because there's a lot of residences where people's children have moved on and they're still there and they may retire there. But certainly when they sell homes, who we sell our homes to are people that want to come here with children. And I think that demographic age is a very good possibility of coming down. Now, the homes I want to ask is a very important point. If it's 40 homes per acre, and I've heard 175 acres, and I heard you're only going to do 100 or 102. My math comes to 4,000 to 5,000. Where does your math come to 192?
Okay, so first of all, okay, it's thick, okay, so it's not spelled out the way you'd rather have it spelled out, because it's legislation, and that's how
Well,
it
make
is.
the legislation smaller. Why are you starting
Well,
with the possibility of giving to a developer 4,000 homes?
I disagree that it says that. So I apologize. You know. So what it says, first of all, is it says, first of all, commercial buildings need to be built first. Okay. It says that, so the commercial is there prior to the residential. It has, and again, we talk about bootstraps. So the first bootstrap is on your mixed use, when you have a commercial piece of property, okay, and then you have
grocery store there.
Excuse me, Paul, I don't mean to cut you off, but you gave us a lot of information, and so did Chris. I just like some simple answers.
Okay,
Really, and
there's a
the simple
real-
answer is, what is the number that the zoning and the plan that you have of how many residences that you are going to allow? And doesn't mean that you are going to let them build it, but the maximum, and we understand all of that.
Yeah.
What is the maximum that they could come in with?
Here, the text as it's currently in its current draft format allows for, within the overlay, 30% of the acreage to contain housing.
How many people is that?
Hmm?
People. Does that equate to any amount of people?
So it allows for 30% of that property that's being developed to have residential. So it's not a matter of if a developer came in and said,
Well, excuse me, will you do the math for me? What does that represent
I'm trying
in
to
number of
walk you through
families?
it. I'm
You
trying
don't
to
have to walk me through, we're looking
it's
for a
not
number.
it's not a hard number. It depends on you know, if someone comes in and says, we want to do a mixed-use development on 20 acres, the legislation as drafted says that there can be residential on within 30% of that footprint. So if you have 20 acres, that means you can have a footprint of no more than whatever that 30%, whatever that number is, 7 acres, 6 point whatever acres of that, of that 20 acres can contain residential. Then it also says, it differentiates the types of structures in the draft. So it says, for example, townhomes is 9 per acre. Okay, so townhomes are 9 per acre. And then it says, and then it allows for multifamily, which could be condos, you know, 3, possibly 4, more likely 3 under Western Reserve architectural style. Could be condo units in a building, which would allow up to 40 per acre. So you're looking at, say, a 20 acre footprint, okay, could be, you know, 6 acres of that, 6.5 acres of that could be used for residential. So you could have 9 townhomes per acre. So that would be somewhere around 54 townhomes, okay?
You're addressing the different developers could have different plans.
Absolutely.
That's not my question. I said, what are you? There is no developer here now.
Right.
You're just dealing with the zoning. I'm
Right.
asking you again, I'll say the same thing. What is, based on the zoning and the plan that you have all put forward and have worked on for 10 years, what is the maximum number of homes that could be in that property? Or the number of families, or number of people, or number of apartments, or number of condos? That's what we as residents would like to know.
Sure.
How many more families are you adding to our community?
The current concept that was drafted would have a total of about 199 residences.
Well, how do we go from 40
On a-
per
wait,
acre to
wait.
199?
On a footprint, if you assumed about 120 acre overall development, if you did that. And again, it's not that I'm trying to avoid your question, it's that these are zoning, it's like, you know, it's like when you go bowling and you put, you know, when you're a kid and you put bumpers in the lane. You're asking me how many pins have you knocked down? Well, we're setting up parameters for what may be. And you're saying, how many families are you adding? We may add 0. We could get a proposal that is 0.
I understand that. And again, I asked
And so
the same
that's why it's
question.
hard for me to say to you, oh yeah, it's this number.
Okay,
And that would be inappropriate for me to say this number.
You gave me the lowest number, which is nice for all of us as
Well, I mean,
residents to hear.
I
The lowest
gave
number
you
was
the-
0.
I
I
gave-
love to hear that number.
But what I
Then you
gave
gave me
you-
a number of 192, so you must have worked up some factor to give me the 192. I'm asking for what is the factor that gives us to the maximum? And for some reason, it's a very difficult answer for you to give me.
No, listen, hey, I tell you, I like to see townhomes back there. I think that somewhere around 120 of the townhomes is what I like, okay? You know, and this is way in the rear of the property, okay? Which would abut the golf course, okay? That's what I see, that's how I envision it. And I see that there will be some units mixed-use commercial area. That's how I envision it, okay? Now, that's how I see it, that's how I always envisioned it before, that's what I've spoke about over time. Whether or not that's economically viable to any developer that comes in here, or whether that takes 20 years for that to develop, but I see it as a mixed use.
Okay, I'm just going to make 2 more comments, then I'll leave. I can tell you this. The number of 7,000 is going to still keep batting around unless you gentlemen, or ladies and gentlemen, take upon yourself to come out with your real number.
Yeah.
Now, until you start talking your number, and I don't, if you're saying your number is 192 from 7,000, there's something that to me doesn't quite add up
Well,
as a
it's
resident of
because-
Concord. So all we're looking for is an answer for that. That's my question.
I don't know who gave, I mean, like, I don't know who did the math to show 7,000, because when I look at the text, and believe me, I spent a lot of time looking at the text, I think it's an impossibility to do that.
Right.
Okay, and listen, that's a horrific number. I want, the question has to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Tim,
You'd be here too.
the only thing, I sat down and tried to do math of 7,700 homes on a, let's call it somewhere in that 100, if all 100 acres were developed that way, which it wouldn't be in a real world scenario, but let's just say, I sat there and tried to figure out how that math was derived, and the only way I could figure it out is if the assumption is made is that on that footprint, somebody came in and proposed nothing but multiple residential properties in a high dense, just tons of them, one on top of the other, as far as the eye could see, and you could conceptually, jam in every square inch of residences, 4, 5, 6 floors up, and fill it in that way. But that's the only way you can get to that number. And what I would say to that is, A, the concept that was drafted by the township's consultant calls for 192, maybe it's 199 overall residences within the entire, that's our concept, how we designed the entire footprint in terms of all the mixed use. It's also to keep in mind that this language is like the Quail Hollow PUD in that it comes to us in terms of having to approve. We are never, and I would even look at the camera for effect here, which is ever going to put in play development that involves high-rise, multifamily type development that would add 7,000 families to this community. That absolutely defeats the entire purpose of a commercial district, and it is not what we are looking to do in any way, shape, or form. What the language does, and why I was struggling to kind of give you a number, is I don't know what a developer, it's kind of like when we have the whole southeast corner of the township, and it's R1 zoning. And you could come in here today and say, how many homes are you building in the rest of the township? And I go, I don't know. We have zoning in place that allows for a certain amount per acre, and then there's factors like riparian setback and all these other things we have in play. And I could say to you, well, you could reasonably get maybe this many, but maybe it's this many and they wouldn't develop this portion, or maybe they would go RCD. So what we've done is we've put an overlay in that allows some parameters. And what we're looking at right now is, seriously to sort of rest some of the concerns that people have, is looking at some ways to do in the language to cap it, so that we don't have a situation where people are like, oh, it's open-ended, because it's not our intention to create an open-ended situation. It's our intention to preserve most of the commercial property as commercial, but to allow a very limited footprint of some potential housing within that commercial footprint. Now, so that's why it's hard for me to say X, because a developer may come in, we may put the overlay on 100 acres, okay? And a developer may come in and say, I'm going to develop, we want to develop 40 of them. And this is our footprint, and it's going to be 60 housing units. That may be all it ends up being. I don't know. But what I'm doing is we're trying to draft the parameters that would allow that and to have those parameters established.
Well,
so that's why the number is sort of hard for me to say, it's this, Tim. This is what it is.
Well,
it's not 7,700.
My final comment to the board is that 20,000 residents of Concord, I'm sure most of us are happy that it's a bedroom-type community. And I would like it to see it stay that way. I know you're dealing with 175 acres, but my concern is I don't want to change the concept, the philosophy, and what we have had here and enjoyed, that I have enjoyed for 30 years. and I'd like it to continue on. But to make it a Crocker Park type community, I don't believe the economics in Lake County could sustain that, quite honestly. And I question how many people want to live in Lake County on the second and third floor above stores. Now, maybe if you go away, if you're snowbirds, if you have that kind of income and you do that a lot, that's fine in the Crocker Park type neighborhoods. I just don't think long-term that this development, or we could sustain those kinds of apartments.
And what I would tell you is that I don't think what we're proposing changes the face of Concord. I think it supplements what's here. I mean, in essence, what we're talking about is a PUD, which is exactly what Quail Hollow was. Beyond that,
on much larger acreage. On much larger acreage.
Yeah, I mean, Quail Hollow still has 4 or 5 phases still to be developed.
They have about 300 homes.
Right.
They have a total of around 700 families with all of the condos, right? So isn't that the total?
Stonehaven has 106 units by itself.
Well, I heard 700, but there's only, I think, 305 homes in the whole development area, and that took a long time to develop.
So there are 4 more.
And I think this will take a long time to develop as well.
But those are homes, not just apartments that could go up pretty quick above.
Right. But again, back to
retail.
the language. The language does not allow someone to just come in and build
Well, I haven't
an
seen the
apartment.
language.
Right. And I'll give you a copy. The language does not allow someone to just come in and build apartments.
Right.
It absolutely does not allow that. There has to be a commercial use, and then that has to then, if you want to do a housing component with the commercial, you must do commercial. It's not a matter of just houses. Anyway,
So to me, I just wish you, as representing me and/or Concord residents, that you could make it as tight as possible and let any developer come in and ask you for more, not to give them the maximum number of residences per acre at the beginning. Let them give it the smallest number with allowance that you can have discussion. But I think that's the way it should go.
Well, we're gonna make it tight so that that allowance is not even there, okay? And the reason for it is because the concept is, there's bootstraps in here already that provide for certain things. You're asking for more bootstraps. It's our plan to put more bootstraps in there. This process, this dialogue, the zoning commission's dialogue, the planning commission's previous dialogue, is for us to refine that, And I'll be more than happy at any time to sit down and go through this with you and, check off, desires that you have that we could address. Believe me, I had the same desires.
Yeah.
Okay.
Still require a
Thank you.
unanimous vote to change it from the zoning?
Sure.
Paul, do you still require a unanimous vote of the trustees to change the zoning? Or is it 2-1?
You mean the recommendation of the zoning commission? No, it's only a majority of the board of trustees.
Richard Wiltsey, I'm at 7721 Woodstar. And I'm not a 30-year resident here.
Richard? Is that-
Yeah, Richard Wiltsey.
Thank you.
Me and my wife Lisa have only lived here for a few years. But we moved out here to an existing place we didn't build. And we did so because we loved the small town appeal, right? And the fact that Concord is very green and the bike trails and all that. And since we've been here, we've already seen a lot of development, most notably on Crow Road, where they decimated a bunch of trees and all that. And yeah, I'm a green kind of guy, but I understand what's happening with the development and why you want to do it. I guess my question is have we considered other options than just development to make Concord viable for the long term? Right? I don't know why we always have to put up more roads, more buildings, more sewers, more expense, and tear down the trees, and is growth always the answer? That's what I ask. And I know you put a decade into this, and for me to come here in only 2 years.
No.
But
Again, our thought is that area, someone's gonna build in there, it's gonna occur.
well, does it have to happen? Is
Yeah.
it something that,
Richard, here's the
I've
issue.
known towns that have put the stops on development before. They say, no more, that's it. We're
Well,
done. We like
our
the
issue
community the way it
is, we're not a city, we're a township. So we are very limited in what we're allowed to do under our revised code. Municipalities like Manor, Willoughby, and et cetera, they have home rule, we do not. So our ability to limit development and how to, let's say, control and mold it is very limited. Now, that area that you're talking about, Cryle Road, Auburn Road, that sort of west of Quail Hollow, north of Girdle, over through Auburn, has been zoned commercial since the 1960s in Concord Township. It's all been zoned commercial, meaning that the township's plan since the 60s has been for that whole area to be commercial. And you see elements of that where Swagelock built Capitol Parkway and Discovery Parkway, a lot in this area where we're discussing right now. They built several facilities in there. Those were light industrial manufacturing facilities. The issue that we have from a legal standpoint, and our legal counsel can kind of jump into that, is A, we don't have the ability to restrict development on owned property and property that's been zoned for business and commercial for so long. We would be sued into oblivion a la Mayfield Heights with the Costco. I mean, that they went all the way to the top and got crushed by trying to stop that. And we'd have even less to stand on, being how much development there has been already in that corridor. And I understand what you're saying. I mean, it's the township in its semi-rural feel. No one can still define what semi-rural is, but I'm like you, I think it actually just means trees. What I would say, I would step back and I would say a commercial corridor, like what we have from 90 down to Girdle Road in that general strip. A commercial corridor, by definition, will never be semi-rural. And it's a limited footprint. And so, and Paul is right. I mean, any commercial district, even what we have in the last 10 years has been slowly developing. Gristmill was put in as part of the PUD for Quail. Lake Health came in and built a $150 million hospital. UH came in and built a $35 million medical facility. We've had a couple new companies come in and fill those vacant Swagelock properties. That's going to continue. And that entire corridor over time will develop all the way out. And that's just a fact. It's going to happen over time, and it's been happening slowly for years, and it's going to continue to. What we've done is we've taken the approach of, it's going to happen. What can we do in terms of our zoning and our process and our infrastructure to make sure that it ends up being something that fits Concord, that at least is something that people will like or be proud of, or it can provide services that, or a sense of place or whatever, rather than just hodgepodge, where the township steps back and does nothing, and it just sort of develops haphazardly in various uses that don't necessarily, are congruent. So the great example, I had somebody the other day complain to me, where Capitol Parkway at the roundabout, there's a business there on the corner that is, they have a granite business, granite countertops, granite, and they're all stacked up. Well, under the old zoning, prior to this board, that was an allowable use type business to be there. And someone said to me, oh, it's an eyesore in that business being there. And I said, well, it's grandfathered in now with all the zoning changes we've made, but in future, the future zoning that we've set in place, you wouldn't be allowed to have that. You wouldn't allowed to be able to have a landscaping business with mulch pile high or something like that, which under the old zoning, you would have been able to have. So we think we've taken an approach of cleaning it up, tightening it up, trying to find ways so that it works in a way that works for Concord. And I think that it's been a constant refinement process through the years, tweaking the zoning, as Paul mentioned, again and again, as new things arise and new projects are brought to us. We get projects all the time that people come to us that want to do in that corridor, and we've rejected a lot of them. We've had heavy industrial requests for that corridor, and we've rejected them.
So
and
we can change the zoning to our advantage if we wanted to at least slow down or
Can't
do
slow down.
what you're talking about, at least bring in the right type of businesses
And
that
I
are
think
going to keep
I
us.
think if you go online and look at our website, and you look at the Gateway Business District and Gateway Medical, and you look at some of those zoning codes, I think in the use, there's use tables in there that would be conditional and permitted, and then, if it's not there, it's not permitted. I think you'll find that by and large, we've sort of narrowed it down to what reasonably fits that corridor.
Okay.
I know the best example of how you're gonna see Starbucks is there, there's a new building going up, Drug Mart's gonna be at the other end, just past PB Bradley, that's part of cleaning up that zoning code.
Right. Just a couple other quick questions here. The traffic, the corner that just went up there that we're also painfully aware of, right? What impact is this new neighborhood going to have on that? Is it going to be passing through that same light that
Which
that we come
intersection are
and
you
go?
referring to?
The one right there as you're getting off 90 and you're coming up to
at
Quail
Auburn?
Hollow. Yeah.
At Auburn, no. I mean, conceptually, someone could go right onto Auburn and go past Lake Health towards our community center, down towards the assisted living.
Right, but getting through that corner now at 5 o'clock, since it's all been redone. I mean, I've seen people get some serious road rage there. Fingers flying and people almost getting in fistfights. What's happening is people are coming out of the hospital, right? And they want to make that
And they're
left-hand
blocking
turn,
the
and they're
intersection.
blocking the intersection. I thought that they tweaked the lights and they made it on a shorter cycle, right? So people could get through.
ODOT's been
Yeah,
trying
yeah.
to refine that again and again. I mean, honestly, part of the problem on that is user error. I mean, I'm going to be kind and say user error. It's really more user arrogance that my time is more valuable than anybody else's, so I'm going to go through the light when it's yellow or red and block the intersection.
That's true, but it would be naive of us to think that that's going to change, right?
I agree.
They get off work and they want to get home.
And I will say that happened prior to the change. I mean, that happened,
ODOT
that's happened for
ODOT
years.
committed to upgrade those lights at a cost of $50,000 to ODOT's expense, that they're going to go and do that. I think there's also an additional tweaking that needs to take place at 90. And that is being discussed with them as well.
Okay, one final comment. You mentioned a millennial brain drain, and I just wanted to tell you, I've seen several millennials move in, most notably right next to me. Right, so I think Concord has that appeal for younger people.
Good.
Right, okay, we're a little bit more pricey than your average person coming out of college is going to be able to afford. But on the other hand, keeping the appeal that we have now, right, is something that a lot of kids want these days, right? Not everybody wants to be an urbanite, so, anyway.
Thank you.
Hi, Lisa LaConte, 8140 Mount Royal Drive. I just have a really simple question. I understand that it's zoned commercial. I don't really have a huge problem with that because I understand that. And I appreciate your really long answers. You know, we get it. We've heard it a lot of times. And Paul, I met you at our homeowners meeting at Mount Royal, and I have heard some conflicting things that you've said. You know, you want it to be like, and there's a lot of terminology that I don't know because I'm just a girl from Mount Royal Drive, but I'm not a politician. But JED and mixed-use development and overlay districts, I mean, I have some terminology too, like social engineering and Agenda 21, but I'm more concerned about what do the people, you know, like Mr. Merlo was talking about when you moved into Quail Hollow, and how it was, I didn't know this until I just heard him say it, but how it was, they were trying to appeal to couples. I didn't know, my parents lived there.
Yes.
They're 70 years old, they live there. So, I mean, I guess that certain communities have demographics that they go for. So I think it would be fair to ask you if there's going to be this overlay of, and I don't really know why we have to draw residents to, I'm opposed to what I've heard so far, and I don't think that it's fair to say you've been doing this since 2004, 2006, yet not have any of the answers and not know the math. I mean, I know the math on my budget if you gave it to me 6 months ago. My kids ask me a question and I got to know the answer. I can't give these long-winded, I lose their attention in like 30 seconds, which I think you've done with us. But I would like to know, what do the people look like? Is it couples? Is it, I heard you talk about high-end.
I think it's a doctor that works next door.
I'm not done.
I think it's a doctor that works next door.
So when you say 175 acres, and Chris, I'm going to help you with the math. When you say 175 acres,
Excuse me,
and they were...
I'm sorry. I'm not saying 175 acres. Nobody said 175 acres.
I didn't even really say a question yet.
But you said, you're starting off with 175 acres, and I apologize, and I don't mean to be rude, but I believe that the issue that's out there in the overlay print is about 120 acres, which is...
Semantics, that's whatever it is. It's vague, and it's scary for people like us that really came out here to kind of live in the country, like you said, So again, commercial is commercial. We all knew what we were getting into, most of us did, with what's going on over there on Crow Road. But my point is, what do you, Paul, envision? Because you've talked to us, me now, I've heard you personally. It's your vision. It's really not a fact, and it's not what's on paper. I've heard a lot about my vision. So, and then you said it's not your vision, Chris, but it seems to be your vision. So what is your vision when you try to figure out what do these people look like that are, you said that there's going to be brownstones, and there's going to be people living above the brownstones, and they're going to be in your own words, be the first ones in there to turn the lights on and the last ones in to turn them off. I mean, that's like kind of 1920s Little Italy, where I used to, I don't understand why you can't have a business and why you have to be there to turn the lights on and off, but that's an interesting concept. But what does that look like? Like, who are you trying to attract? Are they going to be homeowners? Are they going to rent these places? Are they going to be the owners of the businesses? Is somebody paying them to run these companies? Like, who are you trying to bring in? Because other than like an urban environment, I can't imagine any environment within 20 to 30 miles of where we live that someone would say, someone upscale, someone, in your terms, an upscale development, that would want to live in 44, or whatever, again, let's be conservative, that would want to live in an environment that you're trying to paint for us. I mean, whether it's a brownstone, whether it's, I don't know, you called it First and Main in Hudson, and then you called it Concord or Stonehaven, but not really Stonehaven, and then you mentioned Legacy Village the other day. Who are these people that are coming in? What do they look like? Where are they coming from? How much do they make? Do they rent? Do they own? Who are they?
I believe they own. I believe they're the doctors that are working next door. I believe that they are the...
They're a doctor that's going to live above a brownstone.
We're not going to get into the game of trying to decide exactly what their profession is. A lot of it, when you're talking about the footprint, is if you have... One of the things that's been identified both through the county and in the county and in Concord is that we have a lot of boomers who are empty nesters and are getting ready to, that are looking to downsize in the capacity out of the big Center Hall Colonial that exists in places like Quail Hollow or in Mount Royal. And I'm not trying to put that on one, somebody may not. There are a lot of people that want to remain in Concord, but there is no housing stock for those people who are 60, 55, 60, 62, whatever, in that range, that they can move from that house in Quail to something of quality and stay in Concord.
Just to clarify, so 50 to 62 is who you think is going to live there. I think I misunderstood you. Because we're trying to get millennials.
I'm talking, well, in fact, actually that housing stock, the housing stock that is sort of being considered as a concept is one that is both attractive to both boomers downsizing and millennials moving in.
Okay, well, that's completely opposite. Right, we were attracting millennials, now we're downsizing older people, but that's
It's not the opposite. I've said there are two separate populations that are looking for the similar housing stock. Mm-hmm. So when you're asking me, who are these people? Mm-hmm. The analysis shows that they are the boomers that are downsizing out of their Quail home into a townhouse type scenario. in a walking, livable, commercial-type community that has green space, et cetera.
Which,
Millennials.
just for clarification, is completely opposite of how we started this entire conversation with your statistics, but
Right.
that's okay.
Well, I was talking about the overall
I get it.
trend line on demographics in terms of where we are as a community.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting older. The largest population is millennials in the country. They're the growing population.
Please, you don't have to repeat yourself. Move
Right.
on. Okay.
I'm not. I'm simply pointing out that there is no inconsistency in my statement.
Okay.
So the answer is, and I don't know what their professions are. I'm not going to get into that sort
How
of
much do they cost?
guessing game.
Like, or do they have to apply for a mortgage because they're going to buy it, or are they renting from the person that owns the building? Like, I just want to wrap my brain around what it looks like.
I would think most of the housing would be of a buying nature, and you're probably looking at, from townhomes, you're looking at a price point that's estimated to be, $300,000 up.
Okay, 300,000, and you said that there's 9 townhomes per acre. So someone's going to spend $300,000 to split 1 acre with 9 people?
They
With
do it
9 homes?
already in Quail Hollow.
Okay. It's interesting. Because
Have you been to
said that
Players
didn't
Club?
want it.
Have you been to
Yes, but
Stonehenge?
I'm just confused because Paul said that it wasn't going to be like Quail Hollow. He said it was going to be the opposite in my meeting
Well, what
last
he means
week.
is that Quail is a PUD that is primarily residential with a small commercial component. This is sort of its flipped mirror in concept where it's a commercial development with a small residential component. It's the opposite, and I think that's what he was trying to get at.
Both are plain unit developments.
Okay.
but differently planned.
The only other thing that I had issue with before I sit down is, Caroline Connie was talking at the last meeting at our homeowners association, not to worry, that this was a 50 to a 100-year plan. And when I heard that, it was almost like, hey, don't worry, you're not going to live here anymore when this happens. It's a 50 to 100-year plan. So both of you have mentioned your shock and amazement on the emails that have gone out. But I think we're all in this, we might have different ways of coming at it, but I don't think there's anybody in this room that doesn't want what's best for Concord Township.
I agree.
But it's really, really frustrating. And I've been frustrated for an hour sitting here listening to these long answers. To just have someone say how many people, to professionals that have been doing this per your statement since 2004 or 6, like, I can't imagine a deal that I could get into in corporate America, and I run 3 companies, where I could be asked that question, and if I didn't answer it in 60 seconds, where I wouldn't lose that deal. So, like, you either need to be a professional and know what's going on and be in it since 2004, or you need to just say, I don't know what the hell's going on.
All right, I'll comment on that, thank you.
So I think we need clear answers. I definitely don't think that there's a lot of people that would want I think everybody that lives in Concord Township for a while pretty much understands the commercial aspect. It's the residential aspect that I don't think that we, like Chris Lazuka said, I don't think we need to entice people to come here. They're coming here. And they're coming here and they're young. And so, I think that if we could pass something, or if we could get involved in something that included the commercial component, but did not include the residential overlay, I think you'd have a lot more support. So that's all I have to say.
The only thing, and thank you, the only thing I would say is that when you say we've been working on it since 2004 and we don't have the answers, that's, we have been working on starting this board came on board in 2006. But we started with a business corridor study. There was a traffic study in 2007. So when we say we've been working on something for a decade, we're referring to all the various components that have sort of led to this point. Not specifically the language of the overlay district. That's recent and draft language. We're talking about putting in place the Joint Economic Development District, putting in place the traffic study, engaging in the roadway project process, tax increment financing, refining the zoning, updating the comprehensive plan. Those are the things that we're referring to that have been slowly building as line, sort of layer by layer, like this was a house, brick by brick. That's now led us to some additional language, draft language, on the concept of the mixed-use development to try to take it from the ether of a mixed-use development into what does it actually look like, where does it going, what is it, how is it positioned in terms of the market and the analytics that back that up. We're in that process now. So when we say we're working on some things for a decade, that hasn't been being worked on for a decade in terms of specifics to say to you, this is exactly how many people will live there and these are their professions and et cetera, et cetera. That's an ongoing process. But, so I would just sort of step back and say that the work that's led to this has been a decade, not, working on the actual numbers and the zoning language for a decade.
Anyone else? Henry Lacani, 814 Mount Royal Drive, and I've lived here for 15 years after moving here from Concord, a new home. And I want to thank the board for letting me voice my concerns and maybe ask a couple questions. I'll keep it as short as possible. I grew up in Mayfield Heights, 1960 to 82, and I saw Mayfield Heights with Mayor DeJohn with very little vision, really no plan at all. And if anyone's been to Mayfield Heights, it sort of shows up. And I saw Mayor Friedman, I think his name is Harold Friedman, with a vision, with a board that had a vision as well. Both cities were incorporated, I think, within 3 years from one another. And you can see that vision today shows up. So it doesn't take 100 years to have your vision be a flop or a success. Would you agree with that? And I believe that one of the destructions of the devastating blows to Mayfield Heights, where you have payday loan things going on, you have all kinds of craziness going on there. In fact, my school buddy and one of my oldest best friends is the mayor there now, and he's trying to clean up the mess that was left to him, Anthony DeSico. And was the building of apartment buildings. And these apartment buildings were supposed to be wonderful for the community and do this and do that. It was all the spin that I've heard so many different times. And those apartment buildings are all really bad right now. And everybody knows this, I'm not going to get into the words or what it is. It's just not a really good place to live right now in Mayfield Heights. And all my family have moved out of there. And Chris, I'd rather have a Costco in Concord than apartment buildings. So, because you brought up Mayfield Heights with their Costco and how they fought them. And that was, they need, whatever.
I'd rather have neither.
I agree, but it's the lesser of both evils, however it goes. And so I really have only one question. Can you take the apartments off the table? 100%. I love the buildings you're building. I mean, bringing in small business owners, that makes a lot of sense to me, because the Amazons and the Walmarts are killing the small business owner. Malls are closing or downsizing or attracting not what used to be there 10, 15 years ago. Walk through our mall here and look at what's going on at the malls.
Agreed.
I mean, you've got people massaging people now. No one's buying high-end stuff in Beechwood Place. I'm sure Friedman didn't see that coming. But I like all that. I like condos. You say $400,000. Well, if they're going to start building in 10 years, if you do the math, that's not the greatest of condo, but I'm sure you would increase that 400 to adjust.
You like the lofts?
I really don't know yet. I don't know. I think they're a little outdated, but everything in life's retro. It's cyclical. Things come back. I like how it attracts that certain business owner. That makes sense to me a lot. What you are going to get fought on, vehemently fought on, by everybody in this city, well, that's, I don't like absolutes, but 90% of this city is apartments. You will have my support, you will have everyone I've talked to on these hot conversations, these crazy emails, and maybe some emails that make sense. You'll have all these people's support, because everyone talks. I go right for the jugular. If apartments were taken off the table, would you support this? And everybody says yes. You have to eliminate apartments. Can I get some kind of a comment from any one of you or all of you that you will take apartments off the table?
I've already commented that I don't like the apartments. I don't like.
Will you take it off?
I like the lawn.
Will you take it off?
I could take it off. You know.
As a board, you'll take the apartments off the table.
Before it goes to
Talk about
zoning.
I have a
Before it
question.
goes to zoning.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
And again, thank you, because this is good input, because that's what this draft process is about, is the input. It's interesting, because what we sent through, the initial draft that went through and was reviewed by the County Planning Commission, talked about the unit size. And we had said that we should have a large unit size, because we believe that is, when we talk about quality and price point and what I think Concord would support, is we want larger units. County Planning Commission came back and said, you gotta make all those units smaller. Now, we disagree. That's just a recommendation on their part, and in that case, we would deep six that recommendation.
Right.
Is it the idea of apartments, or is it rentals? Because here's the deal. I mean, you can live in New York City and have an apartment that you own.
Well, New York City is a
And I'm
completely
not
different
saying
animal,
that this is New York City. I'm not
400
trying
square
to.
feet is.
But I'm saying
you know,
there are apartments that people buy.
Right.
And we hear a lot of times we just call them condos,
Right.
but
Larger's not always better with apartments, I'll tell you why. It just means more bedrooms. And it just means more co-oping. You can't control that. As a board or you cannot control, look at Gates Mills Towers, okay? Now, I don't think it's called Gates Mills Towers anymore, it's called something else.
I believe we actually can control bedroom.
Yeah, you gotta control the bedrooms.
we
You
have-
put 4 bedrooms in like Gates Mills Towers has, that just means that there's 8 people living in that house, or
And-
apartment now.
And let me just say for the record,
And Gates Mills Towers is completely changed. It's not even the name anymore. I'm using the wrong name. It's flipped.
but let me just say for the record, that sort of development is absolutely not.
Right. I'm just using it, not the size, I'm using the
Sure.
size, not the height, but the size of the apartments.
Right, but I think some of what you're talking about and some of the emails and all that stuff that was going on.
It's hysteria, it's
is
knee-jerk
I think
reactions.
people
I get it.
immediately reacted and thought of those very types of apartment type buildings popping up in Concord. And that's, and I would just say
Right.
for the record, for the public at home, that is absolutely not in this plan in any way, shape, or form. So the question is, so I'm just trying to get to, the apartment component is, is it owner occupied? Is it rentals? That's
It's rentals.
It's rentals. Okay.
It's rentals.
Okay.
It's someone coming in and renting that apartment and bringing with them whatever they want to bring with them. You will you have no say-so. You'll have government agencies fighting you if you try to, fight that.
I understand.
Okay? And that's why you have to tighten this up and put yourselves in a position of strength so we can support you. And you're not in a position of strength right now because you, in your own words, have apartments. Build more condos. Build more commercial area. Get rid of the apartments, please. And can that be, Chris? Can that be done?
I think that what we have to do, and you're gonna go, that's not an answer, and I would let our legal counsel discuss that as it relates to how this text is drafted, is that anything that we do in terms of how we define things and what we limit, we have to be very careful as to with respect to the Fair Housing Act.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to be very, very cognizant of, in terms of, those types of, that language and how that's worded. So,
So is
Just for
somebody
me to come out and
consulting you?
say-
Is there an entity consulting you that you need to put apartments in this proposal?
No, I don't think that that's been presented to us as an absolute necessity.
So then I'd like to hear from
And the word
Mike.
apartment is not
From
actually
Michael.
used in this text.
Okay. Michael, do you think there would be an issue by taking the apartments off the table legally?
Well, yeah, the zoning process, the zoning commission, first of all, can make whatever amendments they want to the existing text. So the zoning commission level, if they want to take apartments out, they could recommend that as part of what's to be considered then at the public hearing before the trustees. So,
Yeah,
sorry?
a little louder.
Oh, that's right, I'm under the weather here.
I don't believe there's speakers in there. That's just
No.
for the
All right.
the recording.
All right, let me start over again.
Okay.
Can everyone hear me now? Yes. Very good. The zoning commission has the document in front of them right now. They can make whatever modifications they want to make to it. And then the zoning commission is a recommending body of the text then to be presented to the township trustees. When it comes up, the township trustees can they have a public hearing required by the statute, and then they can make whatever modifications or changes they want to the text, including putting back in what the zoning commission takes out or making additional modifications. So again, is it against the law to remove apartments? I think you would need some language to modify it, to avoid some sort of facial discrimination, but I think it can be done. Now, whether the zoning commission and/or the township trustees are willing to do that or consider it, that's out of my bailiwick. Okay?
Okay, that's a good answer and acceptable.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. I don't have any other questions. I just want to tell you that you have our support moving forward if apartments are taken off the table. And I believe that you'll get a lot less emails in your inbox that are of a concern. Thank you.
Thanks.
Can I make one other comment? I'm just curious because I think 44 and Auburn Road is, it's terrible now. And you're saying the Ohio Department of Transportation is going to consider it? How are you going to handle all that business that's going to come in there and retail and the traffic?
Well,
I mean, right now, and it's like the smallest, no matter how big it is, it all comes down to the smallest clog. And obviously, the smallest clog is what you said, Paul, and that is at 90. Everything stops because there's that one lineup of getting on a 90. So unless that gets changed, I don't care what else you do there, it's going to all stop. So that has to have at least 2 turning lanes going left, right? We all know that. We all drive there. We're not stupid. So that's got to change. So my question is, how are you going to develop this whatever number of acreage there is without first taking care of the road? Right now, it's a pain to all of us. It's terrible the way that it is now. I mean, I think it's worse now than before you fixed it. I mean, I don't know. I really don't know who did what, but I think it's worse.
Are you speaking of where the...
Wait. We gotta, if you want, you can come up, but we just have to come up and...
No, what we're saying, to clarify it, where you go west, turn west onto 90 from 44, that's what backs it all up.
That's not all.
It's all backed all
The
the
whole
way.
random intersection is what you're talking about.
Yeah, that whole intersection just keeps...
Wait. We gotta one at a time. She can't follow.
Sorry.
One at a time. You can all speak, just one at a time.
Okay. But anyhow, it seems to me, I know we did it, or it was done this way. I would have thought that you would develop the road first before you get all that stuff in there. And I would hope, as a resident, straighten out the problem. I think we have a problem. I see it every day.
We do have a problem.
With the traffic.
I can't even tell you how many meetings and conversations I've had with ODOT for the last umpteen years trying to get them to do something with 44 and 90.
Yeah, it's terrible.
A constant process. And they'll say to us, we're going to work on it, we're going to look at it, and then they don't, and we come back and say, what are you doing about it? And it's, at the end of the day, it's their interchange, and we continue to try to push them to, as we've pointed out to them, you mandated changes at 44 and Auburn based on what you think should be going on there in terms of safety and traffic flow. Now do your part at 44 and 90. You're not going to get an argument out of us.
Okay, well, my question is, though, wouldn't you, to me, it would be like, how could we even think of developing this property to add more to this congestion? Undo the congestion and then do what you want there. But we have a problem right now.
And I will tell you that interchange remains a priority for us in terms of trying to get ODOT to do something with it, because Quail Hollow has 4 more phases to develop, one of which is now coming before Concord with 40-something additional homes that they want to build in that phase. There's a phase that is next to the Lazuka's property that, under the master plan and the PUD for Quail Hollow, right next to your house, between you and the Vitazes, is designed to be high-density condominiums. You're talking about, there are all these new phases of Quail that are still sitting out there. We're averaging 90 new homes a year. Most of those are in the southeastern quadrant. Chardon Township is growing. That traffic is moving through the area. And I would also point out that regardless of what we do, it's commercial zone, privately held property. Someone can come in tomorrow and buy a place, and put an office building on it and bring in 600 jobs, which would be great, but it's going to be more traffic, and we wouldn't have control over that. Right. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, we're going to keep pushing ODOT on that, and you are right about the issues at that interchange, but what we're suggesting here in terms of trying to control development in a plan and a concept isn't really necessarily the problem. It's the overall development that's going to continue to happen in the corridor that we need to try to get, continue to get on top of. So what I'm saying to you is, you're right, but what I'm also saying is, it's still happening. I mean, it's not, this project isn't like well, they don't do it, there's no traffic. It's going to keep adding and piling in, and there is no project right now. There's nothing. So we're quite cognizant of that. And we're looking at some other ideas as well in terms of 44 and how that may be believed, and some things that we're asking ODOT to look at.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Bob Patterson, 10940 Girdle Road, Concord, obviously. And I want to say hi to Sandy, my wife at home. She had to work at Fine Arts, so she couldn't make it. I'm a resident for 36 years, came here a long time ago, and we started talking about taxes when we opened the meeting. Paul mentioned tax time. I got my tax bill too. When I first got here, my taxes were less than $2,000 a year. Now they're approaching $9,500 a year, and when the 4.9 mil levy from Riverside hits next year, they'll be up almost $2,000 a year. So what are we saying here in this meeting with all this development? Right now, that property is zoned commercial. You guys, I thank Paul for the email he sent me explaining what the overlay zoning is. Overlay zoning gives you a lot of power, and I think it's a great idea. I go back to what I said when I came here 2 weeks ago. Use the overlay zoning and eliminate the residential completely, because the more residential that comes in, the more my taxes go up. Quail Hollow, Mount Royal, Little Mountain, all those hit after I moved here. And that's what contributed to the strain and stress on Concord services. So you bring in, I don't care how many people it is, you bring in more people, my taxes are going to go up. The JED won't take care of that. They're not going to pay taxes in the JED unless they're a business.
No, they
right?
pay taxes in the JED.
How do they do that?
It was a change that the state of Ohio made in 2016.
A residential unit is going to pay, well, I did not know that.
2017.
Bring them on.
2017.
2017.
2017, they do.
But only the
You're
ones
going
in
to
the
tax
JED.
homeowners, what, 2% of their income?
Only the ones in the JED.
Okay, so they got an apartment above a store, and you're going to tax them? How are you going to collect it?
Rita does that, but.
How is she going to collect it?
Same way it's collected now.
It's collected from the payroll now.
Yeah.
Well, the payroll isn't going to go through Concord.
They call it tax return.
Well, that's news.
Just like, like Menor fills out,
So that's really going to attract a lot of people. They pay more taxes by moving into the JED. I don't,
Okay.
to Lisa's point, let me just back up a minute. I don't want to be argumentative here. The Hudson, the Crocker Park and everything else, that's not working. I mean, I don't see that as a place that someone would want to go and move to. I see Concord as a place people would want to come. Like Lisa said, people are coming here and moving here. You don't need any signs or anything, they're moving. So my main question earlier was, 2 weeks ago, was do the overlay without residential, and then if you want to add the residential, have a survey of all Concordians, like we did in 2004 with the comprehensive plan. And if they want the residential, they vote on it, fine. But we didn't vote on the 2015 comprehensive plan. There was no survey. It was just a group of people, the zoning, Board of Zoning, and you guys that put that in. I don't go to every meeting. I don't even see it on TV half the time. So I'd say most of the people here didn't even know about this overlay zoning. I didn't know until 2 weeks ago when I got an email from a person that thought I might be interested. This is not the way to do such a comprehensive change to Concord without getting everyone involved. And you get everybody involved by a conversation with a survey. And if that survey comes in and says, hey, bring it on, add more people, and tax them too, then let's do it. But that was never done. You know what I mean? It was never done. Chris, I had conversations with you out at the Sunset Bar and Grill, 2.5 hours. You never once mentioned high-density zoning. Never once mentioned it. You talked about the effort to get this area developed, and I thought it was a good conversation. I talked about the cost of the roads. You were really well informed about that. But this has got to stop right now and freeze it. Just table it. You didn't tell the people here that zoning's already written. It's in front of the zoning commission on the 11th of July.
I did tell them. I started off saying that it went to the planning commission, and went from the planning commission that today we're having this audience portion, but everything next is going to the zoning commission.
Right.
And then from the zoning commission, it's going to come to the trustees.
Unless you change what you give to the zoning commission, eliminate the apartments or whatever.
Mike just talked about that.
Unless you guys
just
change it
addressed that.
before it gets to the zoning commission, they could possibly pass it.
With all
Then
due-
you would have to overrule it or rewrite it in your
With all due
session.
respect, it goes from the planning commission to the zoning commission to us. And that's just the process. And it's a good process because everybody can go there and still address their issues, and there will be a different independent body that's there that could articulate it. They may find additional things to tweak, to change, to address. And then it comes to us with a recommendation, which is, great. That's what we're looking for. That's the purpose, that's the process.
Okay, but to Tim's point on some of his questions on the maximum density, it was a planning commission member, I think Vanessa Pesek, who figured the 7,400.
I just think she's wrong. I just think she's wrong.
But she's from the planning commission. She should know what she's talking about.
I will tell you, yes, and she also said that Concord Township doesn't like, developments like Quail Hollow. And I don't know anybody here who doesn't think that Quail Hollow is a fine development. So
You're not going to find 100% agreement, but if you're going to be able to tax the people moving into the JED and offset the demands from Riverside and, not Riverside, but the fire, police, and roads, if you can offset that with those tax, but you just told me a couple months ago, it's got to stay in the JED.
No, I did not. I said it has to be a nexus to the JED. It's got to be a nexus. So
what's a nexus?
A nexus is it's got to have a close relationship to the philosophy of the JED itself.
Well, remember when I got mad with that 0.3 of a mil permanent levy for the road department? I said, take it out of the JED. You said you couldn't. So that Concord is a nexus to the JED. It surrounds the JED. And if that's true, what's Painesville doing with our 25%? They're not in the JED at all. How are they taking that money and not spending it in Painesville? There's a lot of weird things going on here.
Well,
They are spending their percentage in They're,
Yes,
25%
yes.
is being spent in our JED?
No.
Where?
In
No,
Painesville.
Painesville as the municipality is they are receiving 25%, and to back up for everybody at home, a JED has to be between, it can be between different entities, it can be different municipal entities. In this case, a township has to do it, form a JED with an incorporated entity. In this case, it's with the city of Painesville. The revenue that's generated within the JED district is split 75-25. 75% of it
Right.
coming to Concord,
I
and
read the
25% of it going to Painesville. So what Paul is talking about in Nexus is Ohio Revised Code, and I would just read to you just this brief paragraph that I think explains kind of that nexus, is that it's for the purposes for which the revenue derived from a JED income tax may be used. Law retained in part by the Act, and this is referring to last year's JED bill that the legislature passed and updated the JED the JED language within ORC, requires the JED income tax revenue to be used for the purposes of the district and for the purposes of the contracting parties.
So that's us in Painesville.
Correct. The Act instead requires that such tax revenue be used to carry out the economic development plan for the JED and any other lawful purpose of the contracting parties pursuant to the contract, including specifically the provision of utility services. JEDs are typically formed because it's a means for townships to extend utilities without being annexed. Continuing law requires that the contracting parties annually set aside a percentage of the JED income tax revenue for the long-term maintenance of the territory included in the JED. So what Paul is saying, I believe, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, is that nexus on revenue that's generated by the JED has to be spent in a way from the township that supports the mission of the JED, i.e. the economic development component. So whether it's road maintenance, safety services, utility extension, supporting the activities of that district. So those dollars that are generated have to go back into supporting those, as well as the language does say purposes of the contracting parties. Now, what I would tell you is that this is where the gray area comes.
That's pretty black and white to me. Spend the money where you want it. And Troy told me the same thing. They don't monitor you.
Right.
Spend
Well,
the
they
money
do.
where
They
you
do
want
audit
it.
us. They do. They audit us. They-
There's Painesville Townships in litigation regarding it, so.
So I agree.
So you're going to get in trouble spending it on our roads?
No, I agree. I agree with you, and I agree in this case with Dan. We are entitled, as the contracting party, to primarily spend those dollars to support the JED district. That's the mission of it. But then also under the contracting parties portion, we, in my opinion, we are allowed to spend those dollars outside of those specific properties on things that support, and I believe that language says what supports the community.
Then we should never have had the 0.3 of a mil permanent levy laid on us for the road department. That should have come out of the JED.
So,
Yeah.
what,
You just raised our taxes again. Well, you didn't. The Concord people who trust you to put a levy on the ballot trust that you're making the right decision, and I question that. I really do. Spend the money for Concord. You got a positive cash flow coming in from that JED right now, and it's nice. And if we did nothing, if we just let it develop commercially, you'd have even more positive cash flow. And then you could start the Concord Tax Relief Fund that I sent you the spreadsheet on, and maybe if we do it right, have $150 million in 40 years saved up.
several points on that. One, the JED revenue is going for the purposes of roads. It's going right now. That revenue is going to pay for the road project that was completed. Secondly, I did some research on your proposal. It is not what you're suggesting of putting aside dollars on an annual basis and letting it sort of grow into a nest egg is not allowable for a township to do under Ohio Revised Code. One, it has to be, the dollars have to be spent on that, the dollars are required to be spent on that nexus.
Chris, we put money aside for, when I was trustee, for fire trucks.
Right.
We put money aside for major purchases. We can put money aside for eliminating taxes to the residents in 40 years.
Bob, under section 135.12, Ohio Revised Code says a community, a township, cannot sit on those tax dollars for a period of more than 5 years.
Well, we gotta get it changed.
So
Call
you-
Ron Young and get it changed.
Okay, but now you're outside of my purview of what I'm allowed to do. So I guess what I'm saying to you is I took what you gave and I went and did the research to say, okay, are we, how does that work? Are we allowed to do it, you know? And so the answer is, you know, the 40-year idea of putting money aside, we're not allowed to do currently under Ohio Revised Code. Now, that doesn't mean they wouldn't change it someday, but right now, we're not allowed to do what you propose.
If you think about it, what Troy brought up a month ago on the taxes, we're gonna reach a point where we're just paying more taxes than we can afford, either from the township, the state, or the Fed level. Fed, maybe not so, if Trump gets his way. But think, if 36 years ago when I got here, if we were saving 1 or 2% of our budget, we wouldn't have any taxes for Concord right now.
But you're not allowed to do what you're suggesting.
I didn't know that, but I would have done it anyway.
But so here's the,
Well, when I was trustee, we put 5% of our budget aside and kept it, but it wasn't for 5 years.
Correct.
We got hit with the 2008 crisis and it was gone.
So, with all of that, I agree with you, but I do want to make one point so there's a little bit of clarity here. When you're talking about that 30 years of property tax increase, let's not leave the impression with people that that's all township taxes. Of your tax
Right,
bill, everybody sitting at home,
it's everything.
17% of your tax bill approximately comes to the township. So if you pay $1,000, nobody does, but if you paid $1,000 a year, 170 of that comes to the township to pay for service department, roads, plowing, administration, fire department, and sheriff services. So
It was
I don't want to.
It was 11% 36 years ago, now it's 17%, so it did go up.
So, well, and I think you would agree that asphalt's gone up, fuel's gone up, prices of fire trucks have gone up. I mean, I don't control those kinds of things.
roads.
But I would, and more roads, and we've discussed that
Yes.
roads are a Ponzi scheme. But I don't want to leave the impression with people at home that like, well, our taxes are going up because of the township. I mean, taxes have gone up because Metro Parks has asked for big increases, Lakeland has done bond issues and big increases, MRDD has, all these county agencies. The commissioners just voted to put another one back on the ballot. The school district has raised taxes both in Manor, Chardon, and Riverside. So I don't want to leave this impression like, well, my taxes are going up because of the township.
I would like to see you guys petition Young and Eklund to change the Ohio Revised Code that would require, wouldn't be optional, require 1 to 2%, whatever they think is best, whatever you think is best, of the budgets, of the operating budgets of all townships, cities, and counties be put into a sinking fund that will eventually grow and offset our taxes. That's the only way to get around taxes.
I agree with you philosophically on that. I mean,
it can be done. Eklund's got a lot of
but here's the deal.
connections.
Concord could do that, but there are, with all the local government fund cuts and estate tax elimination, and those things, you know, estate tax getting eliminated is a good thing.
You can't find 1 to 2%.
But my point to you is that there are a lot of communities in Ohio, and it's not just Concord. There are the reason that you're going to struggle to get something like that legislatively approved is you have a lot of villages, townships, and cities in this state that are struggling to meet those numbers, and so they're going to fight back. They're going to push back.
Okay,
I'm just
make it
talking real
optional.
politic.
Make it optional, except Concord to jump on it. We're a rich township. We can do it. You know, I wish we did it 36 years ago. We'd be looking at a lot of money right now.
I don't disagree with you philosophically. I agree with you.
I appreciate you.
We have the ability to do that, but Timberlake doesn't, Fairport doesn't, I mean, I don't mean to, but there are other communities that absolutely don't have the ability, and that's why something like that legislatively, I struggle to think, I don't know that it would be a reality that, now, it could become again, we're limited to 5 years, so we're not allowed to just stockpile cash currently. It would be nice if they would allow us to, of some percentage, and I think your issue in the language would be mandating that villages and cities do it. Maybe allowing the option would be would be an acceptable way legislatively.
There's got to be some way we can look down and have our grandkids say, hey, look at what my grandpa and grandma did. We don't pay any taxes. Kirtland Hills, they don't pay any taxes.
So, well, they do. They
Not
don't have
for
income
Kirtland.
tax.
not for Kirtland Hills support. They pay taxes for schools and stuff, but not for Kirtland. It's supported by a fund they put together, and you said before,
That was a
the
state
estate.
tax. That was a
Well,
state tax.
the estate tax, but also it's a rich community and a lot of people left a lot of money. If we put this in, we can let residents know that they can donate some of their estate when they die.
I don't know about tax law on that, so I won't comment on how that would work, but I would just double back and talk about those revenue streams and talk about the JED in the general sense of, I agree with you in regards to the need for those revenues to take those pressures off of the levies. That was one of the reasons why we established the JED, because as you know, it creates a revenue stream through income and payroll tax for those businesses and individuals that are in the JED district only, that creates revenue. Currently, it's generating a little over $600,000 a year to Concord as part of our share of that revenue. And we continue to work to increase the footprint of that, with the idea being that as the road project is paid off and the footprint increases and we're able to add new businesses and properties to the JED, those revenues will increase so that we can use those for the roads and the services and the things that a growing community needs. That was a large, if you go back and remember those discussions we had about the JED, and we talked about that in those public meetings, that was why we put that in place, because we didn't feel that it was fair that when you have a commercial district, and this was the genesis of this was instigated by the development of Lake Health and UH's properties. When you take large non-profit entities and you take their property off the tax rolls, because those properties were on the tax rolls when they were owned by Avery Dennison, Concord lost their revenue stream, and then we had two major medical facilities that were generating a need for services, road infrastructure, and safety services. And it was not fair to ask the residents of the township in the various neighborhoods around the area to basically supplement those needs of that commercial district, specifically to start those nonprofit businesses. And that's why they signed up and when they joined in, so that we could create that revenue, because there was no way that I was going to go to, Joe Bag of Donuts or, Susie Sunshine's, retiree somewhere in Concord and say, you've got to have a new levy, say, for X, Y, and Z because we have all this commercial development. We weren't going to do that, and that was one of the reasons why we created the JED, to create that revenue so that would relieve that pressure. So I think philosophically, that's very much in line with what you're talking about and trying to protect the homeowners and their interests. And so that was one of the purposes of the JED.
Well, the big thing you laid on us tonight is this tax that you can lay on residents in the JED. I never heard of that before.
It's brand new. State
And-
changed that.
But how you collect it, I have no idea.
Well, it's just like income tax forms that people do every year in any community.
Okay.
You file taxes, do you not?
Yeah, not with the township.
Right, but anybody living within, if someone were to live within the JED district,
They would have to file a tax.
they would have to
with the-
file a RETA form, just like if, say, someone that lived in Menor or Chardon or Willoughby or any other place.
I think that's something I've never heard of in my life. You got a guy living in an apartment, and he's going to pay 2% of his income to Concord voluntarily?
1.75%.
And if he doesn't do it, how are you going to know?
Well, that's what RETA does. RETA enforces that.
Government knows.
Yeah, they know.
No, this is separate. He's getting paid. Are you going to have his place of business pay you, or are you going to have him pay you?
If you own, well, again,
He's got to fill the form out first, but it's like that in Wickliffe, it's like that in Willowick. It's
Every
like that in the city of
municipality, it's no
Painesville.
different.
It's every municipality does that.
if he happens to work in the JED, the payroll tax would be in place. If he doesn't happen to work in the JED,
Okay, I don't want to get mired down.
it'd be no different than any other RETA form.
Just to spend a second on the whole issue here tonight, a lot of people misunderstood everything, and you're trying to clarify it, but is there any way you can just change the PUD overlay, the overlay to eliminate the residential for now, then have a conversation with Concord, do a survey, and if the survey comes back positive, add that to another process? Is it too late to change?
we're going to continue with this public process and all these public hearings and all these public meetings and take everything into account
Yeah, but-
and make modifications.
But it's already, yeah, thank you, it's already there. You've already got the zoning in that includes the high density in front of your zoning commission.
Right, and what I'm saying to you is they haven't yet had a public hearing on it.
No,
And then it has to come to us with another public hearing and other public meetings, and then this body are the ones,
you know the zoning commission isn't going to eliminate the high density. You know
I don't
that.
know what they're going to do.
No, we don't.
The planning commission.
At the end of the day, Bob, at the end of the day, this is the body that will be the final determiner of that language.
So if you guys, you get it from the zoning commission, they pass it, you guys get it, with a 2-to-1 vote, you can change it, or do you have to have a unanimous vote to change it?
No, we do not. This body with a 2-to-1
Used to be
vote,
unanimous.
They changed the state
They
statute.
They changed that. It was
You're right,
So-
it used to be unanimous, now it's.
2-to-1, you can change it to eliminate the high density and then have the survey in Concord.
What it does is the law change turned the zoning commission into a purely recommending body. This body ends up being, if you know, to take the words of
Okay,
Truman,
so
the buck
then-
so here.
So you can change it if you want to.
Yep.
Yes.
And the public hearings,
Current language in there today, the 40 units per dwelling max? So you guys put that in there, or was that already?
You guys,
yep, you have to come up here and,
Sorry.
I just asked who or what body or what put that 40 dwelling per building cap?
That was language that was drafted by, in conjunction between our consultant and staff, and as a recommended, it was worked on between consultant and staff as recommended language on the overlay district.
Okay. And that's what you have issue with?
I do have issue with that. But any good process requires a debate and thoughtful review. And that's part of why it goes to the planning commission and has the planning commission individuals look at that and discuss it, make recommendations. And they've talked about that.
Yeah.
That's coming up to the zoning commission, that they have to sit there and talk about.
But there had to be a rationale behind that. Is that the consultant's recommendation is a cap of 40 units per dwelling to make this a viable program? To make the whole, kind of this area feed itself? You know, you need all these residents to feed the commercial and retail.
It was their recommendation that was a mix that has worked in other similar type projects. No project is exactly the same. There's no cookie cutter.
Right.
And it was their recommendation that if you wanted to attract the quality of development in terms of a mixed use, and a mixed use, by definition, contains a residential component.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it's not a mixed use. I mean, people like to call Legacy Village a mixed use. It's not. It's an outdoor mall.
Sure.
And they have a tiny little ancillary housing and now a hotel, and now they're actually looking to add housing to Legacy Village within that,
Right.
expanding the footprint or something, but I've done on all the details. But so that was language that was brought to us and said, here are recommendations for you to go through your process. Planning Commission, fit within your existing comprehensive plan and your existing zoning code, and then go through the zoning process. Every time we go through a zoning change process in Concord, this is the process. It's not only the legally defined process, it's the, it doesn't always generate from a consultant, but the process is the same. County Planning Commission looks at it, gives recommendations. Then it comes to the zoning commission. They go through it, hold public meetings, public hearings, make recommendations, and then to us.
Our presence at this zoning board hearing on the 11th has really no ultimate impact on what the final decision comes back to you, and you're going to reword it and make the ultimate decision.
I would agree with you, but I think that process of going there and having that discussion and hearing others discuss it and their feelings about it, because they're going to make a recommendation to us, and we got to judge their recommendation. Is it a strong recommendation? Is it weak? Or does it have? And what are the good points? And we get the minutes. We get your voice in there as well, and we review that.
So you're right in the sense that at the end of the day, I mean, not to be crude, but the zoning commission could give us a piece of paper that just has the letter A on it, and then we would we have the power to, that would be their recommendation, and then we have the ability to rewrite that in its entirety if we wanted to. Now, every time we go through a process, you know, we take this public input, starting with the zoning, you know, planning commission, then the zoning commission, and incorporate that. And we've had times where the zoning commission has given us recommendations, and we have really, you know, reworded and
How about the
changed.
survey of the community? Why isn't that a viable, why can't we survey the community? You're hearing from consultants, developers,
I will tell you
lawyers,
this, I
zoning
was
boards,
involved with the
community.
2003, 2004 survey that Bob referenced. I was involved in that comprehensive plan update on the Citizens Advisory Committee. There was a survey that went out as part of that process and asked a lot of sort of generic questions. And a survey is, you know, a survey is only good as the questions and how clear they are in terms of identifying people's, you know, input, and, you know, and any pollster or, you know, would tell you that. Two, they're also only as good as what you get back. I think in 2000, and Connie, you probably remember better than me because you have better memory than I do. I think we got back 11%.
I was going to say about 10%.
It'll be a lot higher this time.
So you say,
It would be.
well, you
It
say
really would
that,
be.
but
Because it's easier. We have technology today, social media. It's so much easier to get the word out. I think it would be very easy. You've
in
got some
that case,
motivated
an
people in
actual
this
hard
room.
copy survey was mailed to every residence. And we got back, I want to say, it was around 10%. I don't know, I don't remember the exact, but it was very low. The other problem that happened, of course, was what we actually got back, we don't know where that came from. Meaning, if I sent you a survey, and then this is what happened in 2004, you could have taken it, made 100 photocopies, if you were an ambitious individual, and sent them back and been like, here you go. So it was a very flawed process at the time. So when people talk about that survey, like, well, the survey said this, and you know.
Right, but we have technology today.
Agreed.
This would be a much different.
Can I respond to that?
Yes.
When Lee Bodnar was here, one of our administrators, he put a survey out on the website. He got no responses. He talked about,
How did he tell
he
you?
talked about it, advertised, he talked about it in the meeting.
Was there a hot topic of the day going on at that point? Like
You know what,
this?
I don't remember that,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying, at that point in time in 2012, it didn't work. Would it have worked in 2015? I have no
Well,
idea.
what matters is what the topic is. And we've got a topic that's got a lot of people motivated once they learn about it.
And here's what I want to, and here's what I would say to you. There are times that, yes, we go through a lot of explaining on answers and walking through elements because there's no, it's this, and that's it. I mean, there's a lot of, when you talk about zoning, you talk about law, when you talk about legal process, there's a lot of gray, there's a lot of these things that go into it, and we try to, you know, sort of boil it down so people can understand it. But there is a lot of explaining and there's a lot of process. So it's not just, you know, if you sent out a survey and said, are you for condos? You know, you can't just do that because that conjures up different visions in everybody's minds. And so then you're into the explaining the context and the process and it's a very challenging thing to do. And let me tell you, I've been on committees where they go through this and there's raging debate over how the question is worded. You know, is it a leading question? Is it a, so the only thing I would caution you on saying, let's do a big survey is that it can become unruly, it can become disjointed, and it cannot, and you might get results that you think are sound, but they may not be. And so it's not as simple as like, let's put out a survey. You know, it's not a Twitter poll. We can't just, you know, what do you want? Well, people will, we talk to residents all the time on different topics like this, and there's nuance. Well, I like this kind of condo, but not this kind of condo. Or I like this kind of business, but not this kind of business. So it's not just black and white, very simple, in simple terms, which is why we go through this very
that 40 units
in-depth process.
per dwelling max is not is not vague, right? This is what most of us are zoomed in on.
I understood, you are heard, and you know, I mean, the question of whether or not you're being heard, okay? And we will continue to go through the process. I ask that you do that as well, but you will continue to be heard.
Yep. Okay, thanks.
Can I say one more thing? Okay, so regarding the survey, I love where everybody's like coming to, we're like almost there, but I don't think that any survey is relevant from 2004, certainly. And I agree with Chris's position that things have changed now, even since 2012. And this is a hot topic, so it's not like we're talking about like a traffic sign or, you know, a stop sign or a traffic signal or something like that. Clearly, this is a hot button. You know, this is something that could potentially change the entire demographic for the city that we live in. And for somebody like my husband and I with 4 boys, this is the house that we chose to live in, that we want to die in. You know what I mean? This is like the last place that we want to live. Well, we're not going to be able to do that if there's this whatever. So, you know, what I would say is, whether it's a survey, and I agree with what you're saying, it's, you know, semantics, it's very hard to get questions, but I mean, some of the questions are pretty clear. Whether it's a survey, a hot air balloon, whatever, Sunshine Act says, you know, you need to get the word out, however we need to get the word out so that everybody understands that this is going on, and obviously it's already out there. And just when it comes back to you, we do know it's coming back to you. So when it comes back to you, I mean, is there some sort of commitment on the position of the trustees that whatever happens in zoning on July 11th, when it comes back to you, can we just table the residential part? I mean, it's zone commercial anyways. There's got to be you know, a lot of revenue there. Why there was ever residential in this plan, I still think is a total mystery. I haven't really got any answers from this meeting on that. A lot of research left to be done, but it's residential. Let's do it. I mean, commercial. Is there a way to just table the residential part when it comes back to you after the July 11th zoning meeting, so that the people in your community that really trust that you're our advocates, you know, can have a minute to really digest what's happening and not just have this like 2-week, 14-day, we just got an email 14 days ago. I'm sorry, but, you know, this is you're doing a great thing for the community. You know, your trustees. That's not what I am. You know, I'm a mom. I've got my own agenda. I can't make it through a ton of meetings, which doesn't mean that I don't want or need to have a say. So now that we know that it's here, you know, I think we just need more time. And since we have established through Michael, and you know, that it is going to come back to you, that you are the power at B, and it could say A, and you could make it Z. Let's just, can you commit to when it does come back to you, that we can table the residential part and we can have more meetings and potentially, you know, take the residential off the table, go ahead with the commercial, see how it affects our tax dollars, see how it affects our revenue, and go from there. I don't understand that. You can add it later.
Can I ask you a question? Do you agree with your husband?
No. I don't.
Okay. All right.
I'm sorry. I mean,
No, you don't have to apologize.
No,
I
I'm just asking.
I don't.
He just wanted to know if he was in trouble when you guys left, that's all.
You know, I think that our goal is the same. Henry and I just come at it different ways. I'm just cutting to the chase. I'm getting to the end game where he has more finesse than I do. You know,
it appears that Henry's position is that he has an issue with density, and you have an issue with any residential period.
I don't want to speak for him, but you know.
That was my impression.
Chipping away is some people's tactic, where other people is just let's call it what it is. You know.
Here's what I would commit to you. I'm not going to make a commitment on any particular, because I don't know what that language is going to come back. So I'm not going to say to you I'm going to do X, Y, or Z. And whether it's the commercial language that's contained in here or the residential or otherwise, what I will tell you is that we're going to go at this in a very deliberative fashion and take into consideration everything that we're getting from the public, be it from this meeting tonight, what happens at the zoning commission, and then subsequently at our own public hearings. We're not going to rush it. We're not going to just bulldoze it through and say this is how it's going to be. We've never done that. I mean, we have these meetings and take this input and move through these processes. And sometimes there's going to be disagreements. We may not agree on everything. But what I would tell you is that we're going to have that deliberative process. And, 2 weeks from now, we're not going to just, pass this thing through without any other, type of consideration. We're not going to do that. That's my commitment to you, so that there's an opportunity for more input, as you say, opportunity to digest and to look at it. Because I don't know where, I have changes that I would like to see to this. Connie, I'm sure, does.
Yes.
Paul has already stated that he's got all kinds of, and I would tell you, that's kind of normal when we go through these zoning processes. There's something that starts out, and then it goes through the process. We get public input, we get it from the planning commission, we get it from staff, we get our own, and then we tweak and we modify based on, where everybody is coming at. So I have things that I would like to see with this. I mean, and I would tell you, first and foremost, that would center around, to begin with, the actual proposed footprint of the actual overlay district.
Paul, did you mention at the beginning of the meeting, you said a lot of dates. Is there a meeting after the zoning when it comes back? Is there a date already set for that?
I believe it's July 11th, it goes to the zoning commission.
Right.
When they're done and it comes
Okay.
to us, it's unknown.
You'll announce it then. Okay.
Because
And I'll tell you, they'll do a public hearing, and depending on what happens in that evening, I mean, they might recess it and have another public hearing. And
my guess is it's gonna go along, and so they'll probably.
Right.
they'll probably do that. And when you get into these big things like this, that typically does happen. And then they'll give us something at some point. That may be 3 weeks from now, it may be 3 months from now.
And that'll be public then when it comes back to
Absolutely,
you?
all of it public.
Everything we do is in the public.
Chris, once they close the public portion, they have to vote on it, don't they?
That's correct. They have a certain number of days, but they could also recess
They
a
can
public hearing
recess.
and continue.
Right.
Hi, Linda Kangas, 7061 Cascade Road. I've lived in here for 46 years, raised 2 kids, and been with the trustees doing lots of different things. I was glad to hear that just because you have a public hearing, and I know you have recessed public hearings before and continued them, but I sort of forgot that. So it's good to hear that something like the overlay and the next project you discuss at length and have a public hearing, that it doesn't mean that within 30 days you have to render a final decision. So that's good to have clear. I was very happy with the fact that we had a resident survey back in 2002 or 3 or whatever it was. Did not realize that you only had an 11% return on those. But I am all for the thought that you give it some more thought and step back just a little bit, or in the midst of all of this that you're working on, do another public survey, residential survey. We will do everything that we can to up the percentage of those who actually get it back to you, because all we heard were good things from those who received them and filled them out and got them back to you. I almost want to say we desperately want you to do that, because we feel that people have lived here for so long, and there are so many age groups of us, that we have such different perspectives. We'd like to give them to you, and I know we're not here. Most of them are out there at home and not watching TV. So I request that of you. I did want to bring it up before I forgot that one of the 2 biggest things on the traffic, the first one is your 44 and 90, but the other is Auburn Road and Cryle Road. I've never seen such a thing in my entire life. If you come from the east side and you get to 44, you are not permitted to go across the street and go to the hospital or the gas station or anything. Whoever did that. Nor can you take a left turn and go south toward Chardon or Capitol Parkway or anywhere. What is that?
Yeah, ODOT required that, and as you can recall, there was somebody who went the wrong way and went on 44 and was driving in the northbound lane and hit someone head on. And I guess that was a frequent occurrence. And so the requirement of the road project required to shut down those types of traffic turns and force everybody to go down Cryle Road.
That makes absolutely no sense to any of us out there who were driving it.
Well,
But that's, hold on.
I,
yeah.
Well, And I understand what you're saying, and I will tell you that that interchange was one of the most, was prior to, was one of the top 100 worst intersections in Ohio in terms of accidents.
And now it's
And-
worse?
No.
No.
In 6 months,
Seems
we've
to
only
be.
had one accident in that interchange. Actually, I drove past it minutes after it happened, and it was a rear ending on 44. People just ran into each other, wasn't any. But what ODOT came to us and said was, we want to change that anyway because there's too many accidents. People were killed, they were hurt, too many, it was too much. And so they said, we want to restrict the southbound Auburn crossing over. We're gonna, I mean, they are, at the end of the day, they are the ultimate arbitrators of
Sure.
that. And they said, we're gonna put an end to that traffic flow to do several things. One, to create less light changes, one less light change, and that process in terms of the left and straight should help the other ways go a little faster. And then two, they were determined from a safety standpoint to eliminate the T-bone accidents and things of that nature that were occurring there. So far, the evidence suggests that they're doing that has been a success as it relates to what their goals were. I would also remind people that sometimes, I mean, look, nobody likes change, in certain things, but people used to complain to me constantly about Cryle Road and trying to go left on Auburn towards 44 and 90. People hated it. They said to me, I try to find another way to go, or I don't want to go left. They hated that. We used to get the backups down the hill on Auburn Road, people trying to go with only one turn lane. Now there's two. There are a lot of elements to that that actually improved traffic flow. And whether people want to admit that that's the case, there are real improvements that happen because of it. Are we happy about the fact that we can't cross over? No, I mean, I'm with you. I wish we still could. I am happy, though, that we've got less people getting hurt or killed at that intersection. So I always ask people to say, that when it comes to that interchange, look at the big picture. There have been some improvements in the traffic flow there. There is, if you want to go, I live on Auburn Road. If you're heading, you're heading towards McDonald's, I got to go down to, not that I need to go there. You need to go down to Capitol Parkway and come back around. And yes, it adds a couple minutes to my commute, but at the end of the day.
But when you turn on to Cryle Auburn from 44, they have these cone-looking things that look like they're not permanent.
Yeah, they're anchored in. They're like drilled down in.
They were, but it makes it a little awful tight and so forth. So anyway, I think a lot of us just needed to let you know how we thought about that. So I am done, but I have a short comment to read to you, and then Denise Brewster is not in town, and then I will give this to you to go in records. So this is to the Concord trustees. Denise Brewster lives on Alexander Road, Concord. This is an open letter to the Concord trustees from Denise. As a resident of Concord for the past 35 years, I am extremely concerned with your plans for the future development of Concord. The fact that this concept has not been transparently shared with our citizenry is alarming, and given the amount of discussion you claim to have had over the last 10 years, the impact of this type of multi-use concept without significant input from the current residents of our township is irresponsible. The people of Concord need to be heard via a survey, and significant modifications need to occur before the zoning board and you as our trustees take us down a path that will change the face of Concord. Denise Brewster.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional? Okay. All right, we'll close the public hearing.
It's not a public
Our
hearing.
audience.
Just the meeting.
You just see what.